Their world is upside down. Young, old, and their dogs. They're fleeing brutal fighting in the Irpin and Bucha areas northwest of Kyiv. The only way out of here, by foot, crossing a broken bridge into a fractured future. This is why they're leaving. Mourning in the north of the country, more Russian menace. In the besieged city of Chernihiv, they're attacked day and night. President Putin says Ukrainians are family, but this is no way to treat your own. What have you done to my house and to the country, you fascist? He's an imbecile, this woman says. How can the world not stop him? The skies remain contested. Anti-aircraft missiles are among the Western military aid pledged to Ukraine, whose defense ministry shared videos earlier claiming it shot down a Russian warplane and helicopter. Ukraine's President Zelensky claimed Russian soldiers didn't know why they were fighting before an off-camera address to the US Senate, pleading again for a NATO-enforced no-fly zone over Ukraine. It's a request being brushed off by NATO. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has been with refugees on the Poland-Ukraine border. Ukraine, not a NATO member, of course, but Poland is.
We've significantly increased the amount and types of military equipment and capabilities that we've positioned in Poland. As President Biden has said, we will defend every inch of NATO territory.
In Moscow, President Putin had close company for once. Trainee Aeroflot pilots wondering maybe where they'll fly with Russia banned from so much international airspace. Their host says Western sanctions are already akin to a declaration of war and warned NATO a no-fly zone would mean armed conflict with Russia.
Any move in this direction will be viewed by us as a participation in the armed conflict of whichever side whose territory will pose a threat to our service members. That very second, we will view them as participants of the military conflict.
But this is Putin's war. This was Thursday in Mariupol, where residents say they're trapped in a city under siege. Russia wants it to create a land bridge in the south with Crimea, but earlier agreed to local ceasefires in Mariupol and Volnovakha to allow aid in and civilians out. Ukrainian authorities say Russia fought on and the evacuation was aborted. Further west in Kherson, defiance in the first major city taken by the Russian military. Hearts and minds not so easily occupied. Go home, there's no vodka here, you Russian animals, this man says. Another man mounts a tank. Kherson is Ukraine, they shout. From the capital Kyiv, yet more on the move. For Ukrainians, these are new national stories. They may speak of for centuries. What we don't know yet is how they end.
Kieran Jenkins reporting. Well, in the last few minutes, it has emerged that the Israeli Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett, has travelled secretly to Moscow, where he met President Putin a short time ago with the aim of discussing the possibility of a ceasefire. According to a reporter who broke the news, Mr. Bennett's office said that he had spent around 2.5 hours in the Kremlin, and the White House was notified in advance. Israel has previously offered to mediate in the conflict, although there have not been high hopes of any breakthrough. Now, earlier I spoke to Sergei Orlov, deputy mayor of Mariupol, a port city in the southeast of the country, which is a key strategic target for Russia and has been under heavy fire for days. I began by asking him what the situation was like on the ground.
We see that city is destroying hour by hour, minute by minute, second by second. All weapons that Putin has in Russian army, he uses destroying Mariupol. He uses aircraft bombing, tactic rockets, multiple launch rocket system. All weapons that he has, he used to destroy the city and to kill Ukrainian and to kill our citizens.
There was supposed to be a ceasefire, Sergei, which the Russians had agreed to, so that people who wanted to leave could leave. What happened to that ceasefire?
They told us that we will have ceasefire and we will have a safe corridor to Zaporizhia. And then happened strange things. Ceasefire does not started, and we said to our people 3 positions from where they can go to Zaporizhia by humanitarian corridor. On this corridor, there is no ceasefire on this corridor. We have fights on this corridor and shelling. This corridor was shelling on this by Russian army. And even in Mariupol, it was shelling. So, then we told to people they should go home, and then started bombing of the places where people collected to humanitarian corridor. Putin bombs places where our citizens collect for humanitarian mission.
So are you afraid that the city will get completely flattened by the Russians? And
yes,
then a lot
I'm
of the
absolutely
civilians
sure.
who live in Mariupol will die?
I am absolutely sure that it is Putin's aim to kill all Ukrainians and to kill all Mariupol citizens. I'm absolutely sure he wants to totally destroy the city. It's a genocide.
What about the Ukrainian resistance?
I'm not a war specialist. I know that Ukrainian army is very brave, and it has possibility to defeat the city on the earth. But we told to our partners in EU, in UK, in USA that we are not able to compete in air. We don't have weapon. We ask our partners to set no-fly area, and we're waiting for no-fly area. If it's not possible to set in this time, why it's not possible to give us weapon?
Do you think that Mariupol will fall to the Russians in the next few days?
I do not want to think about it.
Like Kherson?
I do not want to think
But
about
it could happen.
I think we should find some way to give humanitarian corridor for citizens to evacuate.
What about supplies of food, water, electricity, all that stuff?
It's impossible. City is for 4 days without any electricity, without water supply, without heating, without sanitary system. People do not have any utilities.
And how do you feel personally? How are you and how's your family?
I don't have connection. My family, my mother, father, and brother lives on left bank of the river. I don't have connection with them for 4 days. I don't know, do they alive or not? How do you feel my feeling?
You've had no connection with your family for 4 days?
Yes.
And is there a lot of evidence of shelling of residential areas, as far as you can tell?
All buildings are nearly destroyed. There is no one building in the city that does not have damage. Different kind of damage. Some of them does not exist, some of them with damages. There is no building without damage in the city.
What's your message to the Russians?
I have no message to Russian. Russians should manage their country, Russia. Why did they go to Ukraine? We live in Ukraine, we love Ukraine, we are Ukrainians. Me personally, half Ukrainian, half Russian, but I am Ukrainian. I love Ukraine and want to live in free and independent Ukraine. Russians go to their country and to manage their country, not to kill Ukrainian.
Sergei Orlov, thank you very much.
Goodbye, thank you.
Well, in the south of the country, US defense sources have warned that Moscow's forces could be preparing to approach the key Black Sea port of Odessa by land, with no apparent signs yet of a widely feared amphibious assault from the sea. Warships from Russia's Black Sea Fleet are positioned just off the coast of Odessa. Our international editor, Lindsay Hilsum, is there now. Lindsay.
Matt, what people here fear is exactly what the mayor of Mariupol was talking about, being besieged and being shelled. Today, some people in Odessa heard a distant bang. That was apparently one of 2 Russian aircraft which were brought down by the Ukrainian forces. And then there was another aircraft reportedly brought down over Mykolaiv. That is to the east of here, nearer Crimea. Now, these aircraft may well have been brought down by man-pads, surface-to-air missiles, donated by NATO, the kind that Kieran was talking about earlier. And on that last aircraft, we know that the pilot ejected. He came down in a parachute, and he should have now been taken prisoner. This kind of news will give heart to the people I spent today with, who are preparing to defend their city.
The sand castles haven't yet been washed away, but the beach at Odessa has a new purpose. The children who played here may have fled the city with their families, but this morning hundreds of people assembled at the yacht club to fill sandbags to reinforce Odessa's defences.
I stay here, my wife stays here, my wife also does volunteer work, my mother also does volunteer work. We don't want to go away because I think that the true citizens of Ukraine have to stay here, and we have to go over it together.
In the mist on the Black Sea lurks a flotilla of Russian warships equipped with attack helicopters and tanks. This is the response, self-defense in the form of an assembly line manned by citizens backing up the Ukrainian military, bag after bag after bag.
I keep thinking, what would it have been like to come here 2 weekends ago? People would have been checking the weather out to sea and the cooler to see if their wine was chilled. But now the Odessa Yacht Club has become a place where they're preparing to turn their city into a fortress.
The bags are already protecting Odessa's famous 19th century Rococo opera house. And nearby, World War II era deception. I suspect the Russians may have Google Maps, so might not be fooled. Volunteers have turned a food court into a collection centre, providing supplies to the Territorial Defence Force, funded partly from overseas.
This is total injustice, absolutely unreasoned war, where we are victims, and everyone wants to help us, because it's like a drama, and we have absolute evil. It is Russia.
This is what should have been happening here this weekend. Not everyone is satisfied with donations and solidarity. They want more military support.
You should understand that Putin is really crazy, guys, and if now Ukraine stop him, and if we can't, he go to Europe. We need to stop him now, immediately, together, because he's crazy, and what he make up in the next second, we can't even understand and can't believe, can't even imagine. And that's why, while we have a time, we need to act very quickly, very fast.
Odessans look out to sea, fearing that their friends and allies have not realized the full danger that lies beyond the horizon.
Now, quite a few people I met today asked me why is NATO not enforcing a no-fly zone? So I rang a military expert to ask a couple of things. The Russians did not manage to take out all of Ukraine's air defences on the first night, as they probably wanted to do. They took out the radar, but those mobile surface-to-air missiles are still moving around, and we've seen today that they can be effective. Most of the damage which is being done is primarily by artillery at the moment. On Kharkiv, because they can fire there from just over the Russian border, and Mariupol, because they can fire from Crimea. Now, obviously, above Kyiv, there has been air activity, but I'm told that the Russians tend to be flying their aircraft in pairs and in fours, which are quite vulnerable still. And they're not flying in large formations, which they really need to do if they want to do the worst and flatten these cities. But the main reason is because NATO does not want to get into a major direct confrontation with President Putin. And I think we saw that today with what President Putin said, his warning. They don't want to put the you know, effectively the possibility of starting World War III in his hands. So I'm afraid however much the Ukrainians want that no-fly zone, I think they're very unlikely to get it. And they will be left doing the military defense on their own. And the Western countries hoping that the sanctions, which will be very difficult for President Putin to carry on funding this war, it is not cost-free, neither in terms of Russian lives nor in terms of money. But that is the effort that the West will make. The no-fly zone, I understand, is very unlikely to happen.
Lindsay in Odessa, thanks very much indeed. Well, to discuss this a bit further, joining me now is Dr. Ruth Diamond, who's a senior lecturer in post-Soviet security at King's College London. Let's start with the point that Lindsay was making there, Ruth. The no-fly zone is not going to be imposed. We've got that message pretty clearly. They're very upset about that here in Ukraine. But I just wonder what difference that would make right now when Russian aircraft aren't even flying in large numbers.
I think really the primary issue of a no-fly zone at this point, I mean, obviously it would require NATO to shoot down Russian planes out of the sky, which might not have a direct significant impact on big cities like Kyiv, which are not being directly affected to a very significant degree by Russian planes at the moment. But clearly it would, amongst other things, send a very strong message of military solidarity. And that, I think, is one of many reasons why it would actually be a very dangerous thing to do for NATO.
Right. Now, there's a lot of debate, on social media about whether the Russian army is being effective or not. Are they failing? Are they actually succeeding? But, this is a slower plan than we had given them credit for. What do you think?
I think that this has been extremely bad for the Russian army. This doesn't look like the kind of quick, successful operation that the Russian government clearly expected to achieve in Ukraine. We can see from the way that Putin talked about it, from pre-written articles put up on Russian news websites celebrating a victory that hasn't yet happened. They expected a quick victory and they haven't got one. And in fact, the Russian army now looks very much in some ways like the Russian army of the 1990s that got so badly bogged down in Chechnya. And after 20 years of supposed military reform, this looks catastrophic for the Russian army, I have to say.
Right. And what's the biggest mistake they made?
I think the biggest mistake actually, there are lots of kind of small tactical mistakes that they seem to be making, but the really big mistake, I think, was made by Putin himself, and that was assuming that it was possible, that it was viable to launch a war against the whole of Ukraine and expect it to be successful, let alone expect it to be successful quickly. You cannot wage a quick, successful war against a country of over 40 million people and expect to succeed. It makes no sense. And this is why so many people, including me, actually didn't expect this to happen. So it seems at the moment like a big miscalculation.
Briefly, a couple more. The encirclement of Kyiv, the capital, which you've all been expecting, is that a long way off still, if it happens at all?
It's very, very hard to tell from a distance. But, given the difficulties that the Russian armed forces seem to be encountering in successfully moving troops around and moving them forward, it doesn't look encouraging for the Russian army. You would expect this to already have happened had it been a feasible thing for them to do or something they could do easily.
Right.
The fact they haven't done it is striking.
And finally, Ruth, I mean, looking at the map so far, what do you think that they are realistically trying to achieve? And if they don't achieve it, do you think they might just go for a kind of a scorched earth policy in the big cities with aerial bombardment?
Well, I mean, one has to assume that what they were trying to achieve was a kind of quick decapitation of the Kiev government, and that hasn't happened, by seizing key cities, including Kyiv. And it looks, of course, horrendously like they're trying to achieve a kind of scorched earth approach as they did in Syria, as they did in Chechnya. But again, you know, we've seen huge, tremendous, courageous resistance from Ukrainian people. And so destroying buildings is one thing, but where you have a population determined to resist, that's a very hard thing to do successfully.